The morning I watched Patricia Hendricks from the HOA march across my driveway with her clipboard held like a sword. I knew my peaceful life in Prescott Valley, Arizona, was about to take a turn for the worse. I had been living in the Saguaro Heights subdivision for 3 years, running my small waste management business from my property without a single complaint. My name is Rick Rayburn, and I made an honest living hauling trash for several businesses in the area, including most of the commercial properties that shared ownership ties with our HOA management company. My international dump truck sat parked on the concrete pad I had poured specifically for it on the side of my house, barely visible from the street and fully compliant with every zoning regulation Yavapai County had on the books. Patricia was 52 years old, wore her bleached blonde hair in that aggressive bob cut that seemed to be the uniform of neighborhood busybodies everywhere, and had been the HOA president for the past 18 months. In that time, she had fined 12 homeowners for various infractions, sent violation notices to 30 more, and generally made everyone's life miserable with her interpretation of our neighborhood covenants. She planted herself at my front door and knocked with the kind of aggression that suggested she was trying to break through. I opened it before she could damage the wood. "Mr. Rayburn," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "your commercial vehicle needs to be removed from the premises immediately." I leaned against the doorframe, coffee cup in hand. "Good morning to you too, Patricia. And which commercial vehicle are you referring to? Do not play games with me." "That hideous dump truck you have parked on the side of your house. It is in direct violation of our HOA covenants, Section 7, subsection 3, which clearly states no commercial vehicles may be parked on residential property. That section refers to vehicles parked on the street or visible from the main road," I said calmly. "My truck is parked on a concrete pad on my own property, barely visible from the street, and I checked with the HOA before I poured that pad 3 years ago. I have the email approval somewhere if you need to see it." Her face reddened slightly. "I do not care what some previous board may have said. I am telling you now that the truck needs to go. You have 72 hours to remove it or face a fine of $200 per day." "Patricia, be reasonable. That truck is how I make my living. I run a legitimate business. I haul trash for half the commercial properties in Prescott Valley, including the shopping center on Highway 69 that your husband's company manages. My husband's business dealings are irrelevant." "You have your notice, Mr. Rayburn. 72 hours." She turned on her heel and marched back to her white Lexus, leaving me standing there trying to figure out what had just happened. I called my lawyer that afternoon, a sharp woman named Diana who had helped me set up my LLC 3 years ago. "Rick, I remember that approval," Diana said over the phone. "You did everything right. The previous board president, what was his name, Martin something, he specifically approved your parking pad. Do you still have that email? I will dig through my files." "But Diana, can she really fine me $200 a day? She can try. But if you have documentation showing prior approval and your truck meets county regulations, she will have a hard time making it stick. However, fighting it could cost you more in legal fees than just moving the truck. Where else could you park it?" That was the problem. Commercial vehicle storage in Prescott Valley was expensive and inconvenient. The nearest facility that had space was 15 miles away, which would add 30 miles to my daily commute before I even started working. It would cost me $300 a month in rent, plus the extra gas and time. "I will think about it," I told Deanna. "Let me see if I can reason with Patricia first." I tried. I really did. I showed up at the next HOA board meeting with my documentation, including the email from Martin Patterson, the the previous board president, clearly approving my parking pad and specifically stating that my commercial vehicle would be fine as long as it was not visible from the main street and was parked on an approved concrete pad. Patricia barely glanced at the papers. Mr. Patterson is no longer on the board, and his decisions are not binding on the current administration. Your truck is an eyesore and a liability. It needs to be removed. A liability how? I asked. It is insured, licensed, and maintained. What exactly is the problem here? Another board member, Thomas Chen, spoke up. Patricia, I have to say, I have driven past Mr. Rayburn's house several times and you can barely see the truck from the street. It seems like he is in compliance with the spirit of the regulation. The spirit. Patricia's voice could have cut glass. Thomas, we either enforce our covenants or we might as well not have them. If we let Mr. Rayburn park his commercial vehicle, what is next? Someone opening a car repair shop in their garage. A semi-trailer parked in someone's front yard. That is a slippery slope fallacy, and you know it, I said, trying to keep my voice level. There is a big difference between a work truck parked on a side pad and turning a residential property into a commercial garage. The vote stands, Patricia said. All in favor of upholding the violation notice. Patricia and two other board members raised their hands. Thomas abstained, and the fifth member, an elderly woman named Grace Morrison, voted against, 3-1 with one abstention. You have 55 hours remaining, Mr. Rayburn, Patricia said with a tight smile. I left that meeting knowing I had a decision to make. I could fight this legally, spend thousands in attorney fees and probably win eventually. I could move my truck and eat the extra costs. Or I could find another option. That night, I sat down and really looked at my business contracts. I had been hauling trash for 6 different commercial clients around Prescott Valley. 3 of them were properties managed by Hendricks Property Management, the company owned by Patricia's husband, Gerald Hendricks. Those 3 contracts represented about 60% of my monthly income. The other 40% came from a hardware store, a veterinary clinic, and a small strip mall on the east side of town. But there was one more thing I did that I had almost forgotten about because I did it as a favor. 6 months ago, the HOA had asked me if I could haul away bulk trash from our neighborhood's common areas. Several homes in Sagaro Heights backed up to common space where the HOA maintained a small park and a retention basin. People would illegally dump stuff there sometimes, and the HOA needed someone to haul it away. Patricia had not been president then. Martin Patterson had asked me, offering to pay me $200 per haul, which was below my usual rate, but since it was my own neighborhood and the dumping was getting out of hand, I had agreed. That arrangement was still in place. In fact, I was scheduled to do a haul that coming Saturday. Over the past 6 months, I had done about 3 hauls per month, sometimes more during spring cleaning season. It was not big money, but it was steady, and more importantly, it kept my neighborhood clean. An idea started forming in my mind. It was petty. It was probably not the mature response. But after 3 years of being a model neighbor and running my business professionally, only to be treated like I was running a junkyard, I was feeling petty. Friday morning, 56 hours after Patricia's ultimatum, I sent an email to the HOA board. Dear HOA board members, due to the current dispute regarding my business vehicle and the clear lack of support for small business owners in this community, I am terminating my agreement to haul bulk trash from the common areas effective immediately. I will no longer be able to provide this service to Sagaro Heights HOA. Best regards, Rick Rayburn. I also sent a polite email to my 3 clients whose properties were managed by Hendricks Property Management. informing them that I would be unable to continue service after the end of the current month. I explained that I was downsizing my business due to local regulatory issues and would be happy to recommend another hauling service. Then, I called the manager at the commercial storage facility 15 miles away and rented a space for my truck. Saturday morning, I moved my dump truck to the storage facility. It took me 2 hours to do the paperwork and get everything situated. When I got home, I noticed Patricia's Lexus driving slowly past my house, and I could see her crane her neck to verify that my truck was indeed gone. She actually smiled and waved at me. I did not wave back. The following Tuesday, I got an angry call from Hendricks. "Rick, what the hell is this email about you terminating service? My property manager at the Pronghorn Shopping Center says you are refusing to pick up their dumpsters." Not refusing, Gerald. I explained in the email that I am downsizing my business. Local regulatory issues have made it difficult to operate efficiently, so I am scaling back to fewer clients. I recommended superior waste management as an alternative. Local regulatory issues. What are you talking about? You have been hauling for my properties for 2 years without a problem. I paused, considering how much to say. Gerald, your wife forced me to remove my truck from my own property, which has added significant expense to my operation. The parking space 15 miles away costs me $300 a month, plus gas and time. I am cutting the clients that are less profitable to make the business sustainable. There was a long silence on the other end. This is about Patricia and the HOA thing. This is about me making sound business decisions in response to increased operating costs. Jesus Christ, Rick. Look, that HOA stuff, that is Patricia's thing. It has nothing to do with my business relationship with you. I need reliable hauling. Superior is going to charge me 30% more than what you were charging. Then I would suggest you take that up with Patricia. She is the one who decided to enforce regulations that did not need enforcing. You are seriously going to torpedo a good business relationship over a parking space? No, Gerald. I am making a rational economic decision based on my new cost structure. I cannot afford to keep those contracts at the current rates given my new overhead. If you would like to discuss renegotiating at higher rates, I am open to that conversation. He hung up without another word. That same week, the complaint started. I began seeing posts in the Saguaro Heights Facebook group about trash piling up in the common areas. Someone had dumped an old couch near the retention basin. Someone else had left a pile of construction debris from a bathroom remodel. An old mattress appeared near the walking trail. Patricia made a post asking if anyone knew why I had not done my usual pickup. Several neighbors tagged me in comments. I responded simply, "I am no longer providing that service to the HOA. The board will need to make alternative arrangements." Patricia called me that evening. "Mr. Rayburn, we have an agreement for you to provide trash hauling services." We had an informal arrangement, Patricia. There was never a written contract. I have decided to discontinue that service. You cannot just abandon your responsibilities to this community. Actually, I can. I was providing that service as a courtesy, below my normal rates. I am no longer able to do so. This is because of the truck situation, is it not? This is retaliation. This is a business decision. I am scaling back my operations due to increased overhead costs. I am sure you can find another hauling service. Superior Waste Management does good work, though they will probably charge you about $300 per haul instead of the $200 I was charging. That is highway robbery. That is the market rate, Patricia. I was giving you a discount because I live here. But given the current relationship between myself and the HOA board, I think it is better to keep things purely professional, which means I will focus on my paying commercial clients and leave the HOA to make its own arrangements. She hung up on me too. 2 weeks passed. The trash in the common areas continued to accumulate. Patricia apparently tried to get several other hauling companies to come out, but Prescott Valley only had 4 or 5 legitimate hauling operations, and most of them were not interested in doing one-off pickups for the rates Patricia was willing to pay. The bigger companies wanted monthly contracts with minimum fees. The smaller operators were too busy or too expensive. The Facebook group became increasingly hostile. People complained about the smell, about the rats, about the declining property values. Several residents demanded to know why I was not doing the pickups anymore. Patricia made a long post explaining that I had abandoned my commitment to the community and that she was working tirelessly to find a solution. Thomas Chen, the board member who had tried to defend me, posted a response. Perhaps if the board had not driven away a reliable local contractor over a parking space, we would not be in this situation. Rick was providing below-market service as a favor to the neighborhood. The current board created this problem. That comment got 43 likes and started a whole new thread of argument. The neighborhood was dividing into pro-Patricia and anti-Patricia factions. Then things got worse. It was late April, and the weather in Arizona was heating up. The trash in the common areas, which had been merely unsightly in March, became a genuine health hazard as temperatures climbed into the 90s. The mattress someone had dumped became a breeding ground for insects. Food waste in the piles attracted coyotes. A resident walking her dog reported seeing rats the size of small cats. Someone filed a complaint with Yavapai County Code Enforcement. An inspector came out, took photos, and sent the HOA a notice of violation. They had 30 days to clean up the common areas or face fines of $500 per day. Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting. I attended, curious to see how she would handle this. As you all know, Patricia began, her voice tight with stress, we have a situation with trash accumulation in our common areas. The county has given us 30 days to resolve this or face significant fines. Why do we not just hire Rick to do the pickup like he was doing before? Someone called out. Mr. Rayburn has refused to continue providing that service, Patricia said. I stood up. That is not accurate. I have not refused anything. I simply terminated a voluntary arrangement. However, I would be happy to provide trash hauling services to the HOA under a proper contract at my standard commercial rates. Which are? Patricia asked coldly. $300 per haul for standard bulk waste, $400 if there are hazardous materials or excessive tonnage. I would require a 6-month contract, twice monthly pickups, paid in advance. Someone in the audience did the math. That is $3,600 for 6 months. Rick was doing it for $200 per haul, maybe 8 times a year, $1,600 total. My costs have increased significantly, I said calmly. I now have to rent storage space for my vehicle at $300 per month. That is $3,600 per year in new overhead that did not exist when I was providing the discount rate. My standard commercial rate reflects my actual costs. This is extortion, Patricia said, her face flushed. No, this is business. Extortion would be if I was threatening to harm the HOA unless they paid me. I am simply offering a service at market rate. You are free to hire anyone else you want. You are punishing the entire neighborhood because you are angry about parking your truck. I am operating a business according to standard economic principles. You increased my costs, so I adjusted my service offerings accordingly. If you would like to discuss reversing the parking restriction, I would be happy to return to the previous arrangement. Absolutely not. We are not going to be blackmailed by you, Thomas Chen spoke up. Patricia, this is ridiculous. Rick is being completely reasonable. We forced him to move his truck, which costs him real money. Now we are upset that he cannot afford to give us charity service anymore. How does that make any sense? He is deliberately sabotaging our neighborhood. He is running a business. And you know what? He is doing the same thing to Gerald's properties. My friend manages the veterinary clinic over on Glassford Hill Road, and she said Rick called her to let her know he was prioritizing their account because they had always been respectful and easy to work with. Meanwhile, half of Gerald's properties are scrambling to find new hauling services because Rick dropped them. This is not just about the HOA. Rick is reorganizing his entire business. That was true. After dropping Gerald's properties, I had picked up 2 new clients, a dentist's office and a small restaurant, both on the east side of town near my other non-Hendricks clients. My revenue was actually up slightly because the new clients were paying my full rates instead of the slightly discounted rates I had been giving Gerald, and I had structured my routes more efficiently. I was working the same hours but making more money and dealing with less drama. The meeting devolved into argument. About half the room thought the HOA should just pay my rates and be done with it. The other half, Patricia's supporters, insisted it was a matter of principle and that giving in to my demands would set a bad precedent. In the end, Patricia convinced the board to hire a hauling company from Prescott, 20 miles away, that agreed to do one-time cleanups for $350 per visit. No contract required. It was more expensive than my offer, and they could not guarantee regular service, but Patricia framed it as not giving in to Rick's blackmail. The hauling company came out 2 days later and cleaned up the common areas. The bill was actually $475 because the amount of accumulated trash exceeded their estimate. Patricia complained but paid it. For about a week, things seemed to settle down. The common areas were clean. My truck was at the storage facility. Patricia avoided me, which was fine by me. Then the old refrigerator appeared. Someone dumped a full-sized refrigerator right next to the retention basin on a Saturday night. By Monday, someone else had added a broken toilet. By Wednesday, there was a pile of shingles, presumably from a roofing job, and several bags of household garbage. The cycle had restarted, and it was worse this time because word had apparently gotten around that Saguaro Heights was an easy dumping spot. People from outside the neighborhood were using our common areas as a free dump. Patricia tried to call the Prescott Hauling Company. They could not come out for 10 days and would charge $600 because now there were appliances involved, which required special handling. The Facebook group exploded again. Someone suggested installing cameras to catch the dumpers. Someone else suggested a neighborhood watch. Patricia made a post about entitled contractors who abandon their communities in times of need. I stayed out of it. I was done getting involved in HOA drama. Then Gerald Hendricks showed up at my house. It was a Sunday afternoon in early May, and I was washing my truck at the storage facility when he called and asked if we could talk. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Prescott Valley. Gerald was a big guy, mid-50s, with the kind of tan you get from spending time on golf courses. He looked tired when he sat down across from me. "Rick, I need to level with you. Patricia has gone off the rails with this HOA stuff. I told her to drop the whole thing with your truck, but she would not listen. Now it is affecting my business. I have had to find new haulers for 3 of my properties. I am paying more, and the service is not as reliable as what you were providing. Gerald, I appreciate you saying that, but I am not sure what you want from me. I want to offer you a deal. Come back to handle my properties. I will pay a 15% increase over your old rates, and I will talk to Patricia about the truck situation. Talk to her how? I will convince her to reverse the parking violation. You can bring your truck back to your property. I sipped my coffee, thinking, Gerald, even if Patricia agrees, what is to stop her from pulling this same stunt 6 months from now? The moment I am locked into contracts with you again, what is to stop the HOA from finding some other excuse to fine me or make my life difficult? I will make sure it does not happen. You cannot control Patricia. You know that. She is on a power trip with this HOA presidency. Gerald rubbed his face. Okay, you are right. But what if we put it in writing? You come back to my properties and I will personally guarantee that any HOA fines or fees you get related to your truck, I will reimburse you. We will make it part of the contract. That was actually interesting. You would put that in a legal contract. You would personally indemnify me against HOA actions. Yes, because I know Patricia is wrong on this and I need reliable hauling. You are good at what you do, Rick. You are on time, you are professional, and your rates are fair. I do not want to lose that over Patricia's crusade against commercial vehicles. What about the HOA hauling? The neighborhood trash is piling up again. That is not my problem. That is Patricia's problem. She made this mess with the HOA. She can figure it out. I thought about it. It was tempting. Getting my old clients back at better rates plus the protection of a legal guarantee against HOA interference. But there was something that did not sit right about it. Gerald, I appreciate the offer, but I am going to pass. Why? Because it does not fix the underlying problem. Patricia is abusing her position as HOA president to harass residents she does not like. Even if I am protected, she will just move on to someone else. And honestly, I do not want to be in business with people who need to be legally forced to act reasonably. So you are just going to let the neighborhood turn into a dump. That is not my responsibility. I am a private contractor. The HOA is responsible for maintaining the common areas. If they cannot do that, residents need to vote in a new board. Gerald left looking unhappy, but I felt good about my decision. I had built my business on being reliable and professional, and I was not going to compromise that by getting tangled up in HOA politics, even with legal protections. The situation in Saguaro Heights continued to deteriorate through May. The common areas became a genuine dumping ground. County code enforcement issued a second violation notice with a court date. Patricia hired the Prescott hauling company twice more at increasingly inflated prices. The HOA budget, which had been healthy, was being drained by the trash removal costs. At the June HOA meeting, a group of residents presented a petition to recall Patricia and 2 other board members who had supported her. The petition had signatures from 68% of homeowners in Saguaro Heights. Under Arizona HOA law and our specific covenants, that was more than enough to trigger a recall election. Patricia fought it. She claimed the petition was invalid, that the signatures had been collected improperly, that the whole thing was orchestrated by me as revenge. That last part was not true. I had not even known about the petition until it was presented. Apparently, a group of neighbors had organized it independently, frustrated by the mounting HOA fees, the trash situation, and Patricia's general heavy-handedness over the past year and a half. The recall election was scheduled for July. In the meantime, the trash situation reached a breaking point. In mid-June, someone dumped several dozen bags of what appeared to be restaurant waste near the walking trail. In the Arizona summer heat, with temperatures over 100 degrees, the smell became unbearable. Flies swarmed the area. Several residents reported getting sick from the stench. The county health department got involved. They issued an emergency order requiring the HOA to remove the waste within 48 hours or face an immediate fine of $1,000 per day, plus potential legal action that could result in liens against every property in the neighborhood. Patricia called another emergency meeting. This time, the room was standing room only and the mood was hostile. "We need to address this trash situation immediately," Patricia began, but she was immediately interrupted. "We would not have a trash situation if you had not driven away our hauler." Someone shouted. "Rick Rayburn is not our only option," Patricia said defensively. "He was our best option. He lives here, he knows the area, and he was giving us a huge discount. You started this fight over a parking space that nobody cared about." Thomas Chen, who had been quiet for most of the recent meetings, stood up. "Patricia, I am making a formal motion that the board reverse the parking violation on Rick Rayburn's property and authorize the HOA president to offer him his original contract terms to resume trash hauling service immediately." "I second that motion," Grace Morrison said quickly. Patricia looked panicked. "We cannot just reverse a legitimate violation because it is inconvenient." "It was not a legitimate violation," Thomas said, his voice rising. "Rick had prior approval from the previous board. You overturned that approval for personal reasons. Now the county is threatening to lien every house in this neighborhood because we cannot get our trash picked up. This is exactly the kind of emergency that requires common sense to override rigid rules." The vote was called. Thomas, Grace, and one of the previously silent board members voted yes. Patricia and her one remaining supporter voted no, 3-2. The parking violation was reversed. I was not at that meeting, but I got 6 phone calls about it within 10 minutes of it ending. Thomas Chen himself called me 20 minutes later. "Rick, I know you probably want nothing to do with us after everything Patricia put you through, but I am officially asking you, as the HOA board secretary, if you would be willing to come back and help us with the trash situation. We will pay whatever your standard rate is, and we will put it in writing that your parking pad and your truck are explicitly approved and protected." I thought about it. The mature part of me knew that the neighborhood needed help, and most of my neighbors were good people who had nothing to do with Patricia's vendetta. But another part of me was still angry about the whole situation. "Thomas, I appreciate you reversing the parking violation, but here is the problem. Patricia is still the board president. Even if I come back, what is to stop her from finding some other rule to use against me? The recall election is in 3 weeks. Patricia is going to lose." The petition had almost 70% support. "Once she is gone, we can start fixing things. And if she wins, she will not. But Rick, we cannot wait 3 weeks. The county is going to start fining us $1,000 a day starting Friday. That money comes out of the HOA budget, which means everyone's fees are going to go up. A lot of people in this neighborhood are on fixed incomes. This is really hurting them." That got to me. I knew several elderly neighbors who lived on Social Security. They were exactly the kind of people who would be hit hardest by increased HOA fees. "Okay," I said. "Here is what I will do. I will come back and do emergency cleanups at my old rate, $200 per haul until the election. If Patricia loses and the new board wants to negotiate a regular contract, we can talk then. But I need the parking violation reversal in writing, and I need it to explicitly state that my truck and my business operations are approved and will not be subject to future HOA restrictions. Done. I will have it drafted and signed by all 3 board members who voted yes. Can you do a cleanup tomorrow? I will be there at 7 in the morning." I showed up Wednesday morning with my dump truck, ready to haul out the restaurant waste and whatever else had accumulated. It was worse than I expected. In addition to the bags of rotting food, someone had dumped a pile of carpet, a broken water heater, several boxes of old electronics, and what appeared to be the contents of someone's garage. It took me 3 trips to haul everything away. By the time I finished, it was mid-afternoon. I was exhausted and disgusted, and my truck smelled like a landfill. But the common areas were clean. Thomas Chen met me when I was finishing up. He handed me an envelope. "That is $600, $200 for each load per our agreement. And here is the letter from the board, signed and notarized, confirming that your parking pad and vehicle are approved." I opened the letter and read it carefully. It was straightforward and clear, with no weasel words or loopholes. "Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate you pushing this through. Thank you for coming back. I know Patricia made things difficult." "Where is Patricia, anyway? I have not seen her around." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "She has been laying low. I think she knows she is going to lose the recall election, and she is trying to avoid confrontation. Between you and me, I have heard some rumors that there might be bigger problems with how she has been managing the HOA finances, but I have not seen proof yet." That was interesting, but I did not push for details. I took my payment, went home, and spent the evening deep cleaning my truck. The next 3 weeks were tense but relatively quiet. I did 2 more cleanup runs, both smaller than the first one. Word had apparently gotten around that someone was actually hauling trash again, so the dumping slowed down. The county lifted their emergency order. Then the recall election happened. It was held on a Saturday at the community center. I voted early and then went about my day, not wanting to sit around obsessing over the results. The vote was not even close. Patricia, along with the 2 board members who had consistently supported her, were recalled by a margin of 73%. Thomas Chen was appointed temporary president until a regular election could be held in 30 days. I figured that was the end of it. Patricia would slink away, the new board would be more reasonable, and life would return to normal. I was wrong. 2 days after the recall election, I got a call from Deanna, my attorney. "Rick, I just got a very strange letter from Patricia Hendricks' lawyer. She is threatening to sue you for defamation and tortious interference with business relationships." "What? On what grounds?" "She claims you made false statements about her to other HOA members that led to her recall, and that you deliberately sabotaged your business relationship with her husband's company to damage her reputation in the community." I was stunned. That is insane. I did not campaign against her recall. I barely talked to anyone about the whole situation, and I dropped Gerald's properties because of the increased costs from having to move my truck, which was Patricia's fault in the first place. I know, the lawsuit is frivolous and any judge will see that. But it is going to cost you time and money to defend it. I am guessing that is the point. She is lashing out. Can we countersue for harassment? Possibly. Let me look into it. In the meantime, do not communicate with Patricia or her attorney directly. Everything goes through me. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. Patricia was asking for $50,000 in damages, claiming I had destroyed her reputation and caused her severe emotional distress. The complaint was full of inflammatory language about me being a vindictive contractor who had weaponized essential services against the community. The legal bills started piling up. Deanna was good and efficient, but even so, defending against a lawsuit is expensive. We filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the suit was baseless and that my actions were all legitimate business decisions in response to HOA overreach. While this was happening, Thomas Chen and the temporary board were doing their jobs. They hired me for a regular contract, twice monthly pickups at $250 per haul, which was a fair compromise between my old discount rate and my current commercial rate. They drafted new parking guidelines that were clear and reasonable. They started reviewing other HOA policies that had been problematic under Patricia's leadership. And then they discovered the missing money. Grace Morrison, who had taken over as temporary treasurer, was reconciling the HOA accounts when she noticed some irregularities. Over the past 18 months, Patricia had authorized several large payments to vendors for work on the common areas. The problem was, much of that work had never actually been done. There was a payment for landscape renovation that never happened. A payment for tree trimming to a company that did not exist. Several $1,000s in administrative expenses that had no documentation. Grace brought in a forensic accountant. Within a week, they had uncovered approximately $38,000 in fraudulent payments and questionable expenses. Some of the money had gone to fake vendors, but most of it had simply been written out as checks to petty cash or administrative reimbursement with Patricia's signature on them. Thomas Chen called an emergency meeting and presented the findings to the homeowners. The room went silent as people processed what they were hearing. Patricia Hendricks, the woman who had been so concerned about rule enforcement and property values, had been systematically stealing from the HOA for over a year. "We have contacted the Yavapai County Sheriff's Office," Thomas said gravely. "They are opening a criminal investigation. We are also consulting with our attorney about civil recovery options." I sat in that meeting feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication because it was now clear that Patricia's crusade against me had never been about community standards or property values. She had been looking for distractions, picking fights with residents to keep attention away from her financial misconduct. Sadness because this meant real harm to real people. That stolen money was going to be hard to recover, and in the meantime, the HOA's reserves were depleted. The sheriff's investigation moved quickly. Patricia's husband Gerald, who apparently had no knowledge of what his wife had been doing, cooperated fully and provided financial records. Patricia had been using a separate checking account that she controlled exclusively as HOA president, one that did not require board approval for expenditures under $5,000. She had made dozens of payments just under that threshold, stealing small amounts over time in a way that had not immediately raised red flags. Diana called me with an update on the lawsuit. "Rick, Patricia's attorney has withdrawn from the case. With the criminal investigation ongoing, he apparently does not want to be associated with her anymore. I am guessing the defamation suit is going to quietly disappear. And if it does not, then we countersue for malicious prosecution and abuse of process, and we will win. But I think Patricia has bigger problems to worry about now." I was right. 2 weeks after the investigation began, Patricia Hendricks was arrested and charged with theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The total amount of confirmed stolen funds came to $41,300. It was all over the local news. The Prescott Valley Tribune ran a story with the headline "HOA President Arrested for Embezzlement." Patricia's booking photo, showing her in a jail uniform with her aggressive blonde bob looking disheveled, was shared all over social media. Gerald Hendricks filed for divorce within days of the arrest. He also reached out to me. "Rick, I need to apologize. I had no idea what Patricia was doing with the HOA or with her vendetta against you. I should have pushed back harder when she went after your parking space. I knew it was petty, but I figured it was just HOA nonsense and did not realize it was part of a pattern of behavior. Gerald, you do not owe me an apology. You were not involved. Still, I am sorry, and I want to ask again if you would consider resuming service for my properties. Same offer as before, 15% increase, and we can put in writing whatever protections you want against HOA interference. Though I guess that is not as much of a concern now. I thought about it. With Patricia gone and facing criminal charges, the HOA situation was resolved. My truck was back on my property legally and without any threat of future violations. My business was stable with the clients I had. Okay, I said. Let me look at my current schedule and see what I can do. I am not making any promises, but send me the details of which properties you need covered and what the current arrangements are. I will see if I can work them back into my routes. We ended up working out a deal. I took back 2 of Gerald's 3 properties, the ones that fit well with my current route structure. The third one, which was out of the way, stayed with the hauler he had hired to replace me. My rates were indeed higher, 15% more than what I had been charging before, but Gerald agreed without argument. The regular HOA election happened in September. Thomas Chen was elected president. Grace Morrison stayed on as treasurer. 3 new board members were elected, all of them reasonable people who had been vocal about wanting to reform the HOA and restore trust. One of the new board's first actions was to negotiate a long-term contract with me for trash hauling. We settled on $225 per haul, twice monthly, with an annual cost of living adjustment. The contract explicitly protected my right to park my commercial vehicle on my property and included language preventing the HOA from imposing any restrictions on my business operations that were not required by county or state law. Patricia Hendricks' case went to trial in November. I was not called as a witness, since my conflict with her was separate from the embezzlement charges, but I attended one day of the trial out of curiosity. Patricia looked smaller somehow, sitting at the defendant's table in a conservative suit, her aggressive bob grown out into a softer style. Her attorney argued that she had not intended to permanently deprive the HOA of funds, that she had been under financial stress due to personal issues, and that she had planned to pay everything back. The prosecution presented the evidence methodically, showing the pattern of fraudulent payments, the fake vendor names, the careful structuring of transactions to avoid oversight. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with credit for time served, plus 5 years probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $41,300, plus court costs and penalties. The judge was not sympathetic, noting that Patricia had held a position of trust and had systematically betrayed that trust over an extended period. The HOA eventually recovered most of the stolen funds by seizing Patricia's assets, including her share of the equity in the house she had owned with Gerald. It took almost a year, but homeowners were eventually refunded the money through reduced HOA fees. As for me, life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets when you haul trash for a living in Arizona. My business continued to grow. I picked up 2 more commercial clients in Prescott Valley and 1 in Prescott. I hired a part-time helper to assist with the larger jobs. My dump truck, the same one that had started all the trouble, sat proudly on its concrete pad next to my house, fully legal and undisputed. Thomas Chen and I became friends of sorts. We would grab coffee sometimes and talk about neighborhood issues, though the HOA board under his leadership was so much more reasonable that there were not many problems to discuss. The common areas stayed clean. The dumping stopped once word got around that we had regular, reliable trash pickup again. One Saturday morning, about a year after everything had settled, I was washing my truck when a car pulled up. It was a couple I had not seen before, young, probably in their late 20s. They got out and walked over. "Excuse me," the woman said. "We are thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. The realtor said you are the local trash hauler. We wanted to ask what the neighborhood is like." I smiled. "It is a good neighborhood. It had some problems with the HOA a while back, but that got sorted out. The current board is reasonable, the neighbors are friendly, and people actually follow the rules now because the rules make sense." "What about that?" the man asked, pointing at my dump truck. "Do you get complaints about having a commercial vehicle here?" "Not anymore," I said. "I had one HOA president who tried to make it an issue, but it turned out she was embezzling funds and just looking for distractions. Once she was gone, everyone realized that having a local contractor in the neighborhood is actually pretty convenient. If someone needs a bulk pickup or has a project, they know where to find me." They thanked me and walked on, probably to look at the house for sale 2 streets over. I went back to washing my truck, thinking about how much had changed in 2 years. The whole situation had taught me a few things. First, that standing up for yourself matters, even when it is inconvenient or expensive. Second, that abuse of power usually does not happen in isolation. People who overreach in one area are often overreaching in others too. And third, that communities work best when people act reasonably and in good faith. But sometimes you have to call out bad actors before everyone can move forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Got another pile of junk near the basin. Can you swing by Monday?" "No problem," I texted back. "I will be there around 8. I finished washing the truck, coiled up the hose, and stood back to admire my work. The truck gleamed in the Arizona sun, its paint job a bit worn from years of hard use, but mechanically sound and ready for another week of work. This was what I had built, and I had protected it. Not by being aggressive or vindictive, but by knowing my worth, standing my ground, and letting natural consequences play out. Patricia had created a crisis trying to flex her authority, and in the end, that crisis had exposed her corruption and led to her downfall. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes it is just letting people's own actions catch up with them while you keep doing good work and treating people fairly. I walked back into my house, poured myself a cold drink, and settled in to watch the Diamondbacks game. Life was good. The trash got picked up, the bills got paid, and my truck sat exactly where it belonged, on my property in my neighborhood, causing no problems for anyone who was not looking to create them. And if anyone ever asked me about the HOA situation, I would tell them the truth. I did not start the fight. I did not escalate it unnecessarily. But when someone tried to force me out of business over a parking space, I stopped making it easy for them to ignore the consequences of their decisions. The rest had taken care of itself.